want to thank you again for finding us. Another edition of No Stoplights, as we usually do and are required to do, and should be our priority, is thank our sponsors: Francis Marion University, Carolina Bank, Micky Victor's, MPD Electric Co-op, McCall Farms, Pepsi of Florence, PLC Commercial Real Estate, and McLeod Health. I've always argued that this is a work in progress. I don't have with complete clarity where I'd like this podcast to eventually end up, but we caught a couple of breaks in the last several weeks that have inclined us to go one direction over another. We want to share that news with you, not today because I don't have confirmation from some of the other sponsors and partners and those who've been with us since the beginning of this concept and have allowed us to try and create from concept to fruition what we like this to become. And we've got a pretty significant announcement, I think, within the next 30 days prior to the presidential election for sure, that I think will reflect well on our sponsors. I think you will be far more interested in the end product. It won't be a college dropout from a town with no stoplight yapping his mouth about the world around him and why he's right about everything and everyone else is wrong. But I am excited about, where we were, where we are, and now I have a little bit of clarity in where I think we're headed, and I think you will be excited for us when we make that more clear answer or more clear announcement. So once again, and I'm thinking about it today in particular because we've tried to do a mixture of podcasts. We've tried to do some on local businesses, and there was a curiosity and an interest in some of the businesses and individual businessmen and women we highlighted. We've tried to really pay homage to these corporations and businesses that have so given to the community. Today's going to be political. This is the first podcast we've done post-Labor Day. And I've argued, other than this year, June and July have been pretty dead politically. When I ran for office, you win your primary, you kind of go and try to raise money. You come back after Labor Day and compete tooth and nail in a general in anticipation of winning the public support. This was a very different sort of year. June and July were incredibly eventful in the world of politics. An assassination attempt on the Republican nominee, a changing of the guard with the Democrat nominee. But I still believe that history and the analytics of campaigning really began taking hold post-Labor Day. And I do this with full understanding that I have no idea, and I mean this sincerely, I don't know if Francis Marion University is a liberal or conservative school. Don't care. I don't know if Carolina Bank's run by conservatives or liberals. I don't know that Micky is run by conservatives or liberals. Victor's, MPD Electric Co-op, McCall Farms, Pepsi of Florence, PLC Commercial Real Estate, McLeod. I don't have any idea. The decisions that are made within the confines of that organization are made with a conservative bias, a liberal bias, supporting Democrats or Republicans, moderate pragmatists. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not guarded by it. I'm certainly aware of it, and I try to be respectful of the fact that they probably don't want to be too associated with one side of the political debate or the other. But I think you lose a great deal of your credibility, if you have any, when you appear to be inauthentic for sake of making someone happy or not a little bit nervous about what you may or may not say. I think in this world of media today, the lack of authenticity is something that we all pay a price for. So I've always tried to keep it real, call it like I see it, let the chips fall where they may. And because this is the first podcast post-Labor Day, I want to try to give, to the best of my ability, somewhat of an analytical, not a good old boy backslapping candidate's perspective, but rather someone who has, over the last dozen years or so, invested a lot of time, energy, and effort into understanding how you win campaigns. Why is this person the favorite? Why is it more likely for this to happen than that happen? I've expressed this over the years. I served on county council, and when I got there, obviously, I thought I was the smartest guy in the room, and I learned very quickly that 5 beats 4 every single time. No matter how good my idea was, how bad the other person's was, the one that could get four to go along with their opinion was the one that winners make rules and laws. Losers get angry and filibuster and complain about the rules that are made. We are in a very consequential period in American politics. I've watched and tried to understand the Trump phenomenon. I have great respect for those who don't find it or aren't as sympathetic to the Trump phenomenon as I am. I want to reiterate, I don't know Donald Trump. I don't have any idea what his character is. Don't have any idea what his how his sincerity is. I don't. I'm not going to look inside the soul of a man from afar and be judgmental. I don't have the capacity to do that. He's a flawed man. I am. Most of you are. Flawed men, flawed women, we all are. But I've tried to look at this election separate of the personal, the personality, the bombast, the crassness, the irreverence. I think all those are very legitimate concerns and complaints, but I think you contrast that with a burning resentment that many, many Americans have for their federal government. Once again, I'm not speaking for the sponsors, but I do believe I'm speaking in a very accurate and informed fashion. So when I say the American public appear to be very resentful of the government, I'm not saying that on behalf of these sponsors. I may be saying it at the risk of losing one or two of these sponsors, but I do believe these sponsors understand that there's an interest in calling it like you see it and looking people in the face, I mean, in this case, of the camera, and just kind of, hey, here's how we see it. So I want to play Karl Rove. Rove's not a big Trumpster. We know that. Rove is an employee of Fox, a former Bushy. He would be more of the neocon establishment Republican ilk. But Karl Rove's a very smart man, very intelligent man, and understands politics at a level that very few people in America do. Karl Rove's famous for having a whiteboard. I don't have a whiteboard. It costs too much. But I got some poster paper here and a Sharpie. And I want to, for the next 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, kind of explain where I see the campaign, not from an instinctive and gut-induced position, but rather the analytics. What are the data points? What are they saying? What are the what is the modeling and the polling? I mean, we've got polling coming out every single day. I would argue some's credible, some not so credible. I pay a lot of attention to some of the pollsters. I don't pay much attention to some of the other pollsters. And then we have these models that forecast what may happen. I'll give you an example. I wrote down something on this sheet of paper, coded convention bounce. I mean, we're getting in the weeds now. The coded convention bounce is a data point that a pollster would plug in to a polling methodology that suggests what bounce a candidate will get post-convention. Historically, the Republicans poll at X, and then they get a point, point and a half, 2 points, depending on how good the convention was and how the media received or accepted and told the story of that convention. They'll normally get a bounce. The reason I'm bringing that up, and that leads into my kind of an analytic dissertation, the reason I bring that up is the oddity of this campaign season was we replaced a candidate that had 14 million primary votes with a candidate that had no primary votes. That's unusual. That's unprecedented. We've never seen that happen before. So where do you go to find it? It's kind of like selling a house. Where do you find the comp? There are no comps to that. I mean, it's never happened in American political history. So when the reason I'm talking about coded convention bounce is if Joe Biden is the nominee and Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden by 3 percentage points, odds are post-convention that 3-point lead shrinks to 1.5. When you don't have the normal convention, when you have an exchange of one candidate for another, you don't know how to code the convention bounce. You don't know how to anticipate or predict what that convention bounce will be. And once Kamala Harris became the nominee and Joe Biden stepped aside, we can have a debate about why it happened and how it happened and who led the charge on that side of the political equation. But my argument has always been that the convention bounce happened when they replaced Biden with Harris. That would have been several weeks prior to the convention. So what some of the modeling did that I think was too optimistic for the Democrat nominee was she got a bounce. I mean, there's no doubt about it. When you get rid of an 81-year-old guy who appeared to be kind of in the winter of life, had some cognitive issues, I think most Americans will agree to that. You saw kind of an older candidate replaced with a younger candidate, and the younger candidate brought some enthusiasm, brought some energy that the older candidate had not brought, and you got a bump. Naturally, I mean, you would expect that to be a bump. Democrats became more enthusiastic, more optimistic, more hopeful of the chances that they had to win the campaign. So she gets a bounce before the convention. The polling began to project a second bounce. And I thought that was a little ambitious. I didn't see Harris getting a bounce, once again, for replacing Biden and a subsequent bounce for becoming the post-convention nominee, officially accepting the nomination of the Democrat Party. And the leveling off in the polling, I believe, is because many of the pollsters not only assigned a value to the changing of the candidate bounce, they also assigned probably an equal bounce in the modeling that leads to the polling that I think overstated her support. I hope that made sense. I mean, I'm going in big circles here, but I hope that made sense. So that kind of framed where we headed into Labor Day. Some of the polling reflected two bounces. I argued the polling should have only reflected one bounce, and now we're seeing kind of a changing of the mind as to who's the favorite as we enter into the first podcast post-Labor Day. Now, here are the factors that I want us to pay close attention to. Once again, you may agree, may not agree. I may prove to be right, may prove to be wrong over the long run. But once again, I think the reason that it looked optimistic for the Democrats and Harris, and I'm a Republican, but I'm not a homer. I'm not a sunshine pumper. I'm man enough to call it like I see it. But I still believed, and I think the data is beginning to show that the multiple bounces were overstating her support and likelihood of winning the race. Nate Silver at 538 is a modeler. He's an aggregator. He's not a pollster. Maybe he does some polling, but his claim to fame is aggregating all these polls, handicapping how good or bad they are, plugging this in, I guess, to an algorithm somewhere, and out of that comes a myriad of models, somewhat like hurricane predicting. The cone is more likely to go this way than that way, but it could go this way. So right now, Nate Silver, who I guess is the most renowned modeler and forecaster in American politics, he's certainly the most famous modeler and forecaster, not a pollster. Once again, I think his claim to fame is modeling and forecasting. I checked this morning before we did this podcast. He has Donald Trump winning 61.3 of 100 hypothetical presidential campaigns, presidential races against Kamala Harris. He has her winning about 38.6 or 7. And that's a substantial. It's not a slam dunk. It's not a sure thing, but it's pretty substantial. So when someone says, well, how 3 weeks ago was Kamala Harris at 57 and now she's at 38, Donald Trump was at 43, now he's at 61, I think some of it was the coded convention bounce that never happened, and I never thought would, but I think the majority of it is, we're going to be Karl Rove here for a second. I hope he'd be proud of me. The majority of what I think is happening is as we model, forget the polls for a second, we're talking about modeling here. What is likely to happen in the next 2 months before we get to November 5th? Trump enjoys the benefit of an electoral college bias. What does that mean? I refer to it as the colorful Cajun Carville correlation. James Carville famously said and believes that because of the electoral college bias, Donald Trump can lose the presidential popular vote by 3 percentage points and win the presidency because it's not about the popular vote. That's not how we elect presidents. We use an electoral college system. The founders thought that was the best way to do it. Some like it, some don't like it, depending on which side of the coin you're on. But if Kamala Harris is up 3 points in the national poll, Trump is tied. If Kamala Harris is up 2 points in the national poll because of the Electoral College bias, Trump is +1. So Trump has a 3-point advantage in the Electoral College bias because we don't pick a president based on the popular vote. That's a feather in his cap. That's wind in his sail. That's a data point that helps Donald Trump toward the presidency. The other nugget of information that Silver and some of these modelers and forecasters use is Donald Trump since 2016 has outperformed swing state polling by somewhere between 2 and 2.5%. It was about the same in 16 and 20. I got no idea what it's going to be in 24, but there's a historical analysis that is used and applied, and most of the modelers, most of the forecasters rely on that previous information to basically explain what they think is going to happen in Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, maybe even North Carolina. I mean, I think if North Carolina's in play, Trump's in trouble. But Trump outperforms swing state polling by between 2 and 2.5 points. If Nate Silver's aggregating of polls has Trump down 1 in Pennsylvania, he has Trump likely winning Pennsylvania because, slow with math, 2 to 2.5 is more than 1. Pretty hard, pretty easy to understand. So you've got electoral bias, Electoral College bias in Trump's favor. You've got Trump outperforming swing state polling by 2.5 percentage points. That is another advantage. Now, this is unique to this election. As long as Trump's a candidate and a Republican in general, they're going to enjoy the Electoral College bias. I've got no idea if the nominee were somebody other than Donald Trump, how much that Republican nominee would outperform swing state polling. This is fairly unique to Trump. Number one's not, number two is. This is another uniqueness about this political campaign. When asked what decisions or what issues are you basing your decision on to vote for Harris or Trump, the majority of Americans by a wide margin are saying immigration, inflation, and the economy. I mean, abortion's an issue, crime's an issue, taxes an issue, the debt's an issue, education, infrastructure, Ukraine, Israel. There's an ass of issues. But the majority of Americans say, when I cast a ballot for president, I'm basing it on who I trust on immigration, who I trust on inflation, and who I trust on the economy. And on those three issues, in about every poll, Trump is 5 to 9 points ahead. I think he's 6 or 7 ahead in the Siena poll. He's 7 or 8 ahead in the Rasmussen poll, maybe as much as 9 ahead in some of the Trafalgar polling. ABC, Siena poll is probably a little more liberally leaning. Rasmussen probably a little more conservative leaning. But I've not seen a single poll that doesn't have Trump ahead by a substantial margin on immigration, inflation, and the economy. Because of that, if you answer that immigration, inflation, and the economy are the reason that I'm casting a ballot in favor of one candidate over another, and you say, okay, who is that candidate? And they answer undecided, the modelers say, no, they're not undecided. I mean, if Trump's that far ahead on these three issues that matter most, the undecided are going to break for Trump. Maybe they don't want to verbalize it. Maybe they don't want to admit it. I don't know. I have no idea why you'd say or not say I'm voting for Trump. But the data's pretty clear. And I believe, and the modelers believe, the modelers agree with me, and the forecasters agree, that those undecideds are likely to break Trump's way by a margin of 10 to 12%. It's a big number, but it's not a lot of undecideds. I mean, this is an election where I would argue there's fewer persuadables than there's ever been. The book's written on Trump. I mean, I doubt there are a lot of people out there contemplating whether or not they're voting for Trump. But there's a lot of people out there, I think, that are contemplating whether they want to vote against Trump. Conservative-minded people, believers in the free market, may find her policies a little too liberal, a little too radical, and reluctantly they come home and vote for the Republican, despite not being crazy about this Republican. So because immigration, inflation, the economy are the top issues, and an undecided say, yeah, I'm voting, but I don't know who for yet, but I'm voting based on these three, the forecasters and modelers believe that the undecideds break to Trump's advantage. So those are the 1, 2, 3, 4 data points. One is about any Republican candidate. Any Republican candidate right now, because Ohio and Florida are not in play. I mean, there was a day Ohio and Florida were very much in play and considered swing states, and the Electoral College bias may have been dead even, may have even favored the Democrat a bit. But now you got Florida red, you got Ohio red, you've got smaller swing states, fewer swing states, and that has given the Republican an Electoral College bias. Trump is a unique political figure. We call it the lean Trump voters. They won't verbalize their support for Trump. Is that why he still outperforms the poll? And will he? I don't know. Don't have any idea. All I can go on is 16 and 20, and that's all the forecasters and modelers are going on. So in conclusion, what does that mean? It means to me personally, and I think it means to the Nate Silvers of the world, that Donald Trump is far more likely, 61 out of 100 times, Donald Trump is going to get to 270 Electoral College votes. That's what it takes to get the job. I mean, if he wins a few swing states, loses a few swing states, he gets to 270 and wins the job. Some of the modelers have Trump's best day at 313. I mean, that's Trump taking advantage of the Electoral College bias. That's Trump outperforming swing state polling by 2.5%. That's Trump. That's the undecided is breaking Trump's way by somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 percentage points because immigration, inflation, and the economy are the issues of which they're voting on, and they think Trump will do a better job on those three issues. Now, I would argue if the Electoral College bias is Trump plus 2, if Trump outperforms swing state polling by 1 instead of 2.5, if the immigration, inflation, economy voters don't break for Trump plus 10, you got a dogfight. I mean, it's a toss-up. It's anybody's race. You've got the turnout machine of the Democrats. You've got the boots on the ground that the Democrats just do a magnificent job, especially in swing states. When they deploy assets and resources, they get more bang for their buck than Republicans do. They just do. They're just better at it. Are they more obsessed with wanting to be in charge of government? I don't know. Don't have any idea. But historically, their ground game is better. Their turnout machine is obviously better. Nate Silver, I don't know how the forecasters and modelers, I don't know how you say, okay, the Republicans have closed the gap a little bit on voter turnout in Pennsylvania. The Republicans have closed the gap a little bit on boots in the ground in Arizona. I don't know how you assign a number to that. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But I just know as we speak today, and this is the first podcast post-Labor Day, we're less than 2 months away from Election Day. We're probably less than a couple of weeks away from people casting ballots that'll be counted in the November election. It looks to me, and most modelers and forecasters today agree, it looks to me that Trump's path to 270 is more likely than Harris's path to 270. There will be polling fluctuations. There will be a debate this Tuesday. I told a buddy of mine who's a big Trump supporter, I said, it's Trump's to lose, but he's very capable of doing it. I mean, he's kind of a wild card. He doesn't always follow the script. Some like that, but there's great risk in someone who doesn't follow. Trump's not real good at running the clock out. He's not, and I'm not saying he has a big enough lead to run the clock out. I think they still got to grind and win, and I'm not being a homer. I want to reiterate, I want Trump to win. I make no bones about that. I'm a former Republican office holder. I still support Republicans. I believe the Republican Party, to me, offers the best path forward, the best vision for America, that they're not without flaw. Trump is kind of a byproduct of Republican failure over the last couple of generations. I think Republicans led in the way they sent mailers in the mail and ran television ads and radio ads, and some of the questions they gave on Meet the Press. Donald Trump would have got 2% of the vote. He would have exited stage right in 2016. But I think there was a great misalignment, an asymmetrical relationship between the Republican Party prior to Trump getting here and the Republican base voter. He offered kind of a new flavor. Some like it, some don't. He brings a lot of the blue-collar voter to the table, what I call the political non-affiliate. They're going to vote, but they're not ideologues. They're not real interested in whether you are Republican or a Democrat. What do you say that is very relatable to me? And some say sincere, some say he's not. I don't have any idea. Once again, I'm not going to judge a man's soul from afar. What I've tried to do, and I guess I did it in a good old boy fashion, I've tried to analyze the data that we have today and the picture that I believe is most accurate today. And I think if you look at all this data, some is unique to Trump, some is about the Republican advantage of the Electoral College bias. I think it's more likely that Trump gets 270 than it is she does. Now, if he catches every break, and the bias is what the colorful Cajun Carville correlation says it is, if the immigration, inflation, economy voter break heavier in Trump's advantage, he could get as close as 313 in the Electoral College. That would be him winning about every state he won in 2016, plus Nevada, plus the 3 that have been reapportioned post-2020 census. He got 232 in 2016. If he wins those exact same states, he gets 235. To me, the most likely scenario, let's say this is half correct. Let's cut these numbers in half. I still think 235 holding serve plus Georgia is 251 plus Pennsylvania is 270. So he can win the presidency, lose Michigan, lose Wisconsin, lose Nevada, lose Arizona. I'm not saying he will or won't, but I just think his multiple ways to get to 270 convince me as we sit today. May have a different story after debate or after the debate this coming Tuesday, but as we sit today, it is the opinion of yours truly and no stoplights that Donald Trump is more likely than not to be elected President of the United States in November 2024.